Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, everyone. A touch of winter here in Kingman, Arizona, about 37 degrees this morning. For those folks in the North Country, that's springtime in Minnesota. We're having going to try to get a hold of Steve Clem here this morning. Steve's got a new book, and he's just a great fella to talk with. I just really last week, as you noticed, we had a kind of a pre-recorded program. I was in Los Angeles and Burbank taking care of some things, and you can find a little bit of information about that adventure on a recent blog post on our Jim Hinckley's America website. And it was quite an adventure. I like say I'm pretty partial to places with 3 stoplights or less, but I'm pretty easy. I'm a pretty adaptable. I find ways to do things, and I stayed out in Burbank. I had business out that way, and discovered some really great time capsules out there. Of course, the legendary Bob's Big Boy, one of the originals, they've managed to keep that very original. 1949. Found the Coral Cafe. It is opened in 57, I believe. The biggest damn menu I've ever seen in my life. It 400 plus items on the menu. And then I found a Talleyrand restaurant, 1959, stayed at the Safari Inn, 1957. Really great time capsule. Today we're visiting with Steve Clem out of Tulsa. And I really, this says so much about Steve and his sense of humor. Face for radio and a voice for silent film. Steve, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm doing well. My girlfriend suggested I have 2 cups of coffee before talking to you this morning.
Well, I don't think a fellow can ever have too much coffee.
I agree with that, but she just knows me so well that I'm not exactly an early morning person.
Well, I know this is a tad bit early. I try to balance the two because I reach such an international audience. Of course, we do this live so we can get people interacting, but I publish it for audiences on Spotify and other channels. And I'm an old farm boy, so my day starts, it's getting close to lunchtime. Does that tell you how early I get up?
Yeah, so you've probably fed the chickens and done all kinds of things this morning already.
I start about 4:30 every day.
Wow.
So, Steve, how are you doing? How are things in Tulsa?
Things are fantastic in Tulsa. I mean, I just got to tell you, on this subject of Route 66, Tulsa has come alive, as you probably know, certainly in the last decade, but a lot of it's been in the last 5 years with all these wonderful new attractions that we have here. And we're now the capital of Route 66. And it's just really fun to be a native here and to see the incredible transformation that the 66 in Tulsa has made.
I've said this often, but we've done a very good job of marketing Route 66, but we've marketed it as small town America. And as a result, the cities get overlooked. They've gotten short shift. And Tulsa has changed that. Tulsa has become the poster child for how a city can reclaim their Route 66 heritage. You guys are doing a fantastic job.
Well, gosh, I wish I could take some credit for that. Yeah, I mean, you're right. And it's happened on all these different fronts, and it's been a really, partnership, between the state and the city government and individual entrepreneurs. Like Mary Beth Babcock is probably the shining example in Tulsa. She got Buck Adam Cosmic Curios going, and now I call that area Land of the Giants because there are four muffler men, right there concentrated like in a block area of Tulsa. And there's going to be another one coming soon, and a 66-foot dinosaur is going to be built by the same person who, Mark Klein, who does the molds has done the molds for the newer giants.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say big town or small town, Steve. You guys are setting the example on how we have to build a network of cooperative partnerships to make this work.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you're a big part of that, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that. I've just kind of joined the ranks of that, although I've been a Route 66 enthusiast since I was a young man in the 1970s. I kind of discovered that the commerce of the nation ran 4 blocks from my grandparents' house in Sapulpa, Oklahoma. And ever since the 70s, when I kind of discovered that, I'd been following, followed the basically replacement of Route 66 by the interstate highway system, until the last section was bypassed. And, was very aware of that period of time when everything was kind of in limbo since the road was decommissioned in 1985. There was a little bit of a time there when everybody really wondered, is it over? Is, America's classic, pathway, has it gone down into history now? Is it no more? And that's one of the exciting things for me is that it was a Tulsan who brought that back to the forefront, author Michael Wallace. Now he
Yes.
was displaced from he was from St. Louis, another wonderful, Route 66 community, but he moved to Tulsa in the early 1980s, and I've got a chapter devoted to Michael Wallace in this book, Route 66 in Tulsa, that just came out. But it was Michael who, in the late 80s, he started hearing people talking about the Mother Road in the past tense. And that bothered him because he was someone who kind of lived his very active life kind of, up and down, Route 66. He'd been in the Marines in the 1960s, and that's the pathway that he took, and even hitchhiked home from the Marines on Route 66 back to St. Louis. And he'd written, as an author, actually was writing for magazines at that time. He'd written lots of articles and lots of things about Route 66, and it was so close to his heart that he started hearing people talk about it as if it no longer existed. So he wanted to write what he calls a love letter to the road, which became his 1990 book, Route 66, The Mother Road. And that book, when it came on the scene, it just exploded. Jim, I don't know where you were in your, in 1990 in terms of Route 66, but it exploded everywhere, and they eventually sold 1 million copies, was on New York Times and Los Angeles bestseller lists, and it got him Michael Wallace's first Pulitzer Prize nomination for that book. And it just, it really coalesced everyone's, the efforts on keeping Route 66 alive and bringing it back. And so that's just one of Tulsa's connections to the Mother Road, which, is that Michael Wallace was here living in Tulsa when he wrote his best-selling book that really started the renaissance of Route 66. And you and I know, as historians, there are some other people that were like,
Well,
that were already talking
uh,
about Route 66, but he coalesced those efforts.
well, yeah. As far as where I was at, I've been Route 6. I was a latecomer. I've always been involved with Route 66 since 1959, almost everything in my life. But for me, it was just a comfortable place. And when they bypassed it, it didn't change anything I was doing. I was still driving Route 66, still hanging out in the cafes, and still visiting with people. Everything I've done with my writing, as far as Route 66, my presentations, everything is based on the pioneers. It's built on the work of Michael Wallace and Jim Ross and
Hmm.
Jerry McClanahan and Kip Wellborn and all these folks. It's yeah, these guys are the pioneers. Don't you? I find it interesting that the reason we're even talking today about a road that doesn't exist is because of the work of Tulsans like Cyrus Avery. They're marketing genius. And yet we owe the Renaissance to another group of Oklahomans like Michael Wallace and Jim Ross and Jerry McClanahan.
Yeah,
Pretty,
you
pretty
mentioned
interesting.
it is, isn't it? There's a real concentration of that here in Oklahoma for some reason. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Cyrus Avery. I've got a chapter in this book devoted to Cy, and it was really fun for me to get to know him a
Yeah.
little bit. He was a dynamic individual. He came to Oklahoma when he was about 35 years old with a young family, relocated here because the oil boom town of Tulsa was the place to be in 1907, which happened to be also the year of statehood for Oklahoma, which is the 46th state. And it's a very crowded marketplace, and Cy was such a dynamic businessman with diversified interests that he kind of rose up in that as a leader. And his main thing is that he was an advocate for in the good roads movement, and I know
Mm-hmm.
that you're familiar with that. But I would characterize that movement as being in the 19 teens and 1920s when people were making that transition from the horse and buggy era to owning automobiles and not having roads to drive them on. People were ready to hit the road, but the United States was still in the horse and buggy era in terms of trails
Yes.
and unpaved roads. And I guess the only people who took a hit on the national highway system that they came up with in 1926 is farmers who used to make some considerable extra money pulling people out of ditches and that kind of thing. Because there really were, once you got out of major cities, it was mostly unpaved trails left over from another era, from the horse and buggy era. And so
You know,
Cy Avery became a leader in the movement to get a national system of paved highways.
as an example of how bad the roads were, I did some work a couple of years ago for the Historic Vehicle Foundation. They recreated Edsel Ford's 1915 trip along the National Old Trails Road, and they gave me a copy of his travel journal. And July 15th, 1915, Edsel's journal, he notes leaving Williams, Arizona that morning and arriving in Kingman at the Brunswick Hotel at midnight. And it was 153 miles. He said that was a good day's run. He only had 2 flat tires and 1 broken spring.
Wow, isn't that something that really does bring it home?
Your passion for Tulsa and for Route 66 and it shines bright in your new book that you did with Becky Hatchett. It really comes through, and
Um,
I gotta tell you, this is one that's got to be added to the library.
oh well, thank you so much, Jim. Long been a fan of your work, and I've been influenced by by you and Jim Ross, who you mentioned earlier, and Shelley Graham, who are
Yeah.
they have written I what I think is the quintessential centennial book on Route 66. I'm sure you've talked about that.
Yes, I had them on back in May before I came to Tulsa.
Yeah, and they live there in Arcadia, Oklahoma, which is very near Oklahoma City. But I mean, I've grown up, so to speak, in my Route 66 life. Reading your books and Michael Wallace and Jim Ross, who's written extensively about Oklahoma 66, and Jerry McClanahan has also been a big influence on me. So I'm I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here.
When you did this, your book on Route 66 in Tulsa, you'd already been, kind of deep into this, but were there anything that really discoveries you made that really surprised you?
Well, there are always fun things like that when you're, you know, writing about a project. Um, there were some things that were just fun to discover. And this one, the Pierce Oil Company
Mm-hmm.
in the late 1920s, after the national highway system was basically formed in 1926, Pierce Oil Company of St. Louis got this idea that they would place what they called at the time terminals, travel terminals, at key places. Some people, you'll see it written every couple of hundred miles, is what some of the literature says, on the major U.S. roads, kind of in the region of St. Louis. Every couple of miles, they wanted to have these terminals because they knew the traffic was coming, and so they built these 40-room hotels, and they were just like a downtown hotel, but they built them on the outskirts of these cities. And Tulsa's, they called it the Pierce Pennant Terminal. Tulsa's Pierce Pennant Terminal opened in 1929 with a 40-room hotel 6 miles east of Route 66. And it had the hotel, it had a gas station, it had a nurse on duty, it had a cafe. I mean, Pierce Oil Company was like ready for the rush. And Jim, as you know from your studies of Route 66, in 1929, the year the first Pierce Pennant terminals were built, the average lodging on Route 66, if you could find it, would be maybe camping in a city park or a crude cabin, in an auto camp. And here come these huge hotels. And it's just that was a surprising but fun discovery.
I think there's the only one that has kind of survived is over by Wildwood, Missouri, near St. Louis, the Big Chief Roadhouse. I think that's the only one of those that has relatively survived.
I think you're right, and I believe there were five of them built until the Depression hit and killed their plans. I know for a fact that Sinclair Oil Company ended up buying Pierce, and so the terminals that did exist turned into like the Sinclair, Pennant terminals, and that's what Tulsa's did. Turned into that in the 1930s, but they learned pretty quickly that they really couldn't get people excited about some luxury accommodations, outside of major cities. So it was an experiment that to me was just completely fascinating,
It,
but not a great idea, maybe.
William Clay Pierce's vision for these was he wanted to create a modern version of what the Harvey houses were for the railroad.
Yeah.
He wanted to create for the highway system.
Mhm.
And it was a brilliant idea. It was just the timing, the economic conditions, the timing, and other things were just not conducive.
Yeah, exactly. And it turned out that people on the road needed something a little different than like the downtown hotels. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
as the lodging along all the roads of the United States developed into the motels and everything that we are so accustomed to today, they didn't have any of that. It was a clean slate in the late 1920s, and so this was Pierce Pennant jumping in there, or Pierce Oil Company, trying to make a mark in that and drive the lodging, but it hadn't really been formed enough for them to really build what would really be necessary because nobody knew what that was yet.
You've got some great places, and I know that in your book here that's from Arcadia Publishing on Route 66 in Tulsa, the Blue Dome gas station in Tulsa is that's another milestone business. That was very unique for its time.
Yes, and I still can't believe it when I read it was a 24-hour, operated 24 hours a day, opening in 1925. I still, sometimes wonder if that's true. And then every source that I would find on it would say the same thing, that he had this 24 hours a day operating service station in the middle of downtown Tulsa, which at that time was the oil capital of the world. There were just more oil companies, large ones and independent oil companies, located in Tulsa at that time than anywhere in the United States. And the refineries in the Tulsa area were producing a very high percentage of the petroleum products nationwide in the United States. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, that some of the prototypes for the modern filling station, would originate in Tulsa. And the Blue Dome is the shining example. Even the design of that, Jim, is patterned after a mosque in Istanbul, Turkey. And I never really know how to pronounce it, but it's something like the Hagia Sophia. I mean, I know that's an American pronunciation.
Yeah, I know the place. I know the. I don't. I did. I never connected the two until you
Yeah,
mentioned it.
well, that's all the literature. What all the literature says when you research it, and things were so volatile in that time frame, the mid 1920s. The company that built it which was called Chastain Oil Company. Within a couple of years, they'd sold it off to someone else, and it operated many years as a Gulf station, and that's what's on the cover of the book, Route 66 in Tulsa. It originally had bays that kind of reminiscent of the tower station in Shamrock, Texas. In some ways, they had these bays jutting out from this really interesting dome, and in those bays is where they did, the light mechanic work, which was a first. Um, They offered things like free air and free water and had restrooms for customers. These were all things that were just beginning, and so they were a pioneer in the kind of services that a gas station, would offer.
You've also wrote a book on the theaters of Tulsa, and Professor Nolan Stoltz says that he'd like to ask. He said a lot of the old theaters seem to have been demolished, but he was curious about the Majestic or the Palace theaters there in Tulsa.
Well, the Majestic was one of the big four theaters in Tulsa, and it called one of the big four because they were right in the heart of downtown. At that time was the oil capital, a bustling downtown area. There was like a mini Times Square. Is the only way I can describe it. If you ever look at films of that area, downtown Tulsa during the 1940s and 50s, and even into the 60s, it looks like a mini Times Square. All these department stores and movie palaces, of which the Majestic was the first one. I believe it was built around 1920, and right there on the corner of the heart of downtown Tulsa at 4th and Main. And two larger movie palaces were built right on the heels of the Majestic, which were the Orpheum and the Ritz. And they were designed by this architect who at the time was based in Chicago, but he became so successful designing these movie palaces all around the country that he ended up moving to New York and being one of the big movers and shakers in theater design. But he built two movie palaces in Tulsa, the Orpheum and the Ritz. And the Ritz was one that he called atmospheric. I don't know if you've heard that term. he called that an atmospheric theater because he had built that to be like outdoors. The experience was like being outdoors in an Italian villa, and so it had twinkling stars and clouds that were projected over the heads of moviegoers. I mean, just an incredible. He built this, experience, and he had perfected it in Houston at a theater there, and then brought that concept to Tulsa. And I don't know how many atmospheric theaters there really were built, but Tulsa had one, and just really something special. And urban renewal is what killed them here, Jim. And I'm not as familiar with the Palace, except I know it's in my book, and my co-author Maggie Brown actually wrote about the Palace, and it was one of the early theaters in Tulsa, and there were many of them, but they were in very small spaces. And what was interesting to me, Jim, on the researching the Tulsa movie theaters book was early movie theaters were just tiny. They were just, part of a space in a block with a few chairs in there, and film with some flickering film that might be, 15 minutes or less in duration. And then of course there was the piano player or organ player that accompanied the silent films. And that continued, until around 1930, whenever all the movie theaters were outfitted for talkies. And so I had fun writing that book. It's a tragedy that Tulsa lost their grand movie theaters, but urban renewal in Tulsa just came along and tore down blocks and blocks of all the old buildings and built new. And it wasn't until really like the late 1970s that Tulsa got organized when it came to historic preservation.
It's funny. A lot of communities did this, especially in the 50s and 60s. They wanted to present themselves as modern.
Yeah.
So they either demolished the old stuff or they put up more modern facades over the old facades. And now we've come full circle on a lot of this. I was talking to Mary Frances O'Day with Mid-Century Modern 2 weeks ago here on Coffee with Jim. And now the things they built in the 50s to replace the old stuff is considered classic. And that makes me realize just how old I am that I start thinking of things like that. But a lot of communities, Tulsa was not alone. They lost so much of their historic integrity, their tangible links to their early history, especially their theaters. The theaters suffered mightily most everywhere.
Yeah, well, the tragedy of Tulsa, and when it comes to that particular subject, is just that because of the oil and the money flowing through the city at the time that those movie palaces were thriving, made it that Tulsa had some of the nicest theaters in the United States. And so it's a tragedy that, unlike the Coleman Theater in Miami, Oklahoma, that was preserved, Tulsa managed to let all of their movie palaces, slip through their fingers. So it is too bad. In the heyday of Route 66, which I always kind of consider, maybe the 1950s, a person would encounter a half dozen movie theaters in Tulsa, from east to west, starting with right on the eastern edge of Tulsa was what started as the Highway 66 theater. It was Tulsa's first drive-in theater, and then all the way through Tulsa, there were beautiful theaters, a lot of them in the streamlined modern style. And the classic one people talk about the most here, right on Route 66 on 11th Street, was the Will Rogers Theater. And it was demolished in the 1970s. And gosh, that's just one that everybody wishes, was still there.
It's pretty amazing. Route 66 in Tulsa, I just am amazed and impressed. The last, like you said, 5 to 6 years, how much has happened along that corridor. It's really astounding. Mother Road Market. I went there this last summer. It's my first time being there. What an impressive reuse of industrial space, and in such a manner that it fosters development of a sense of community. That is impressive.
I know, and that's one of those things that from the moment it opened, it was a classic. You know what I mean? I mean, the people came immediately, and it's been voted. I know at least twice. It's been voted by USA Today newspaper or magazine, whatever you view that as the top food hall in America, the Mother Road Market in Tulsa. And if if people listening to this are going to come through Tulsa, that one is at 11th and Lewis, and it's just a must stop. And,
Yes.
It's I mean, in simple terms, some people might say it's a food court, but it's a very unique food court with a Route 66 theme running through it. They try out new restaurant concepts there. Anyway, you walk around and you can make your decision on what you're going to eat from a variety of different cuisine. That's really a cut above what you would find in a normal food court. And murals of Route 66, even miniature golf that has where you can hit a golf ball through the mouth of the blue whale, things like that. And that's another fabulous story on the outskirts of Tulsa, the blue whale.
Yes, it is. You know what I found with Route 66 in general? I was just giving an interview the other evening, and I was asked to kind of define Route 66, what really makes it different from other highways. And aside from the passionate people, the community that is Route 66, as Michael Wallace says, a linear community.
Yes.
It's Route 66 is the diversity of the American story made manifest. Every chapter of the American story is on this road. In New Mexico, Route 66 is on the Santa Fe Trail, the National Old Trails Road. You've got villages in western New Mexico right off Route 66 that are people have been living in 1,000 years. And they're at the Mother Road Market. I was so impressed to find authentic foods from Nigeria, Korea, Louisiana barbecue, classic hamburgers, all in one place. That's the diversity of the country made manifest in one place.
Yeah, well said. One thing that I devote a little bit of time in this book of the how Route 66 got the 66, the numbers, which is just kind of a fascinating story. It originally was going to be Route 60. They'd already designated it as Route 60 when Cyrus Avery and the different highway commissioners from states all around the country, when they were devising the plan, they wanted to assign 0 to the major roads that were going from east to west, and they had designated 60. And then the governor of Kentucky, and the 11th hour, after Missouri and Oklahoma were already printing signs and printing maps, the governor of Kentucky said, wait a minute, there's no major roads that come through my state. I need a major road. And so he demanded that the number 60 be used for a road through his state. And Cy Avery was asked to try to find a solution to that problem that threatened to derail the whole national highway plan. And so they started looking for numbers that were not used, that nobody had claimed, and they ran across the double sixes. And they just liked the idea of the double sixes and how it sounded and how it looked. And so they changed it. And there's a famous telegram that you and I have seen probably ad nauseum from a regional meeting in Springfield, Missouri, that's being sent to the national highway officials in Washington, D.C., saying, it's from Cy Avery and another one of his colleagues there, and it says, we agree to the number 66, to replace the number 60, for our route. And wow, just imagine, get your kicks on Route 60 just doesn't quite do it, does it?
No, it does. Once you can't. It's just hard to imagine
Yeah,
that.
I
And I
just
know that puts a kind of a rivalry with Springfield and Tulsa. Who really is? Where is really the birthplace of '66? But I have to. I was really surprised that Tulsa grabbed and was able to trademark the capital of Route 66. I thought that was kind of. I think that's kind of a neat idea for marketing. Can't beat it.
I know it. I was not in the inner circle of people that were involved in that process, so I came upon it the way that the average person did, and I thought at first well, that's interesting, and then of course the more I looked into it and thought about it, I mean, it's really kind of a brilliant move to be known as the capital of Route 66. And yeah, I don't feel a rivalry that much. I mean, you and I, we both go to things like the Birthplace Festival in Springfield, Missouri, and you and I have seen each other at the Miles of Possibility conference multiple times. And I feel like everyone's got their place on the road.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that's really it. And so I my hat's off to Springfield for building on that idea of where the road was really born through that meeting and telegram and making it what it is. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, Michael Wallace, like I said, he summed it up as a linear community, and I see it as America's longest small town. It really works. And going back to a couple things, talking about restaurants along Route 66 in Tulsa, across from the Campbell Hotel on my last visit, Sweetie Pie's Amish Kitchen and Bakery. I discovered in a strip mall on Route 66 across from the Campbell Hotel. And I ended up eating breakfast there twice. That was, boy, that's a gem. That's a gem.
Yeah. It's funny. I have not eaten there as of yet. But yeah, I mean, gosh, you just described, what some of the magic of Route 66 is. It's that discovery of fun things, or what might be around the next curve,
Yeah.
or whatever. I'll tell you, the thing that people ask me the most now that I've had this book out is, they see a book like this or any Route 66 book, and they're confronted with there being different alignments
Yes.
of Route 66, and it takes a minute and a little bit of explanation to try to tell people what the different alignments are about. But it's basically different alignments through different eras. When it first started, when they first made the national highway system, they respected property lines a lot, and that's why there are so many 90-degree turns on the early alignments of Route 66. It seems like it's almost one 90-degree turn after another going around people's property.
Yeah.
And then as the years went on, all the improvements were to straighten the road and make it shorter, and to widen the road to make it wide for the increasingly wide vehicles that were being mass produced. And so there are different alignments. Tulsa really only has a couple of alignments, and I know when you get to a city like St. Louis and even Oklahoma City, I feel like there needs to be a course before you enter those cities. Say, hey, here's your course on navigating Route 66 through this town.
Yeah.
So many different alignments in some of those cities.
It evolved. The road was never able to fully evolve to meet the tsunami of growing traffic, and that's why the interstate highway became a necessary evil. But like I think it was, to paraphrase loosely something Charles Corral said, the interstate highway made it possible to travel coast to coast and see absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
It became sterile. And that's, I think, one of the reasons people are drawn to Route 66. It's the people like yourself, the people in Tulsa, the infectious enthusiasm people have. You mentioned Mary Beth Babcock there. Gosh, that's what gives this road a magic that other highways like US 6, 12, 50, they don't have.
Yeah, that's right. That's
I was
right.
gonna, I was gonna ask you. I got to thinking about our conversation earlier, and I have to wonder if there's something in the water in Tulsa because not only did we have Cyrus Avery and his boys, his team marketing Route 66, which is really like say why we're doing this, and then you had the pioneers, which of the Renaissance are which are related to Tulsa and Oklahoma, and now we have the new generation coming up to carry Route 66 into the centennial and towards the bicentennial.
Yeah.
People like Reese Martin, Reese and his wife
Oh,
Sam.
absolutely. My gosh, if you were trying to pick somebody that could lead us into the next century, you couldn't do better than Reese Martin.
Yeah,
Wow.
Reese and his wife Sam are just. I get exhausted just watching the stuff they do. I just.
I know. The Miles of Possibility Conference, which moves around the state of Illinois every year. I was following Reese this year. This was just a couple months ago, and I was following his travels, and I thought, and it's the week of the Miles of Possibility conference came up, and I thought, my gosh, Reese is in like Albuquerque right now. I guess he's not going to Miles of Possibility. And then the next day, there was a post from the Miles of Possibility conference from him. He had flown from Albuquerque to an event there to the Miles of Possibility, that the next morning, so he could take in that conference as well. He's just amazing.
I want to encourage folks, like say, if you get out, you don't have to be a fan of Route 66, but it helps. But if you're a fan or curious or want to see how your community, big or small, can be transformed, revitalized, building a sense of community, take a look at Tulsa. Spend some time along the Route 66 corridor in Tulsa and talk to people. If you're a fan of fascinating, diverse, interesting restaurants, check out the Route 66 corridor in Tulsa. And for interesting lodging, they got you covered on that too. The Desert Hills Motel and the Campbell Hotel.
That's
That's
right.
quite a success story about uh, urban renewal.
Yeah, I can't believe that building survived. It's wonderful. It was built before Route
Yeah.
66, a couple of years before. And I'm trying to think what they call that style. It takes up a whole city block. It might be like Spanish Mission revival. I'm not an architect, but it's a beautiful building that when in its day, when it was built in the 1920s, it was one of those that had a hotel on top, like so many buildings did back then. A hotel on top, retail shops on the bottom, and I think, for years it had like a barber shop, on the bottom, and a hair salon and a restaurant and stuff like that through the years. It sat abandoned for decades,
Yeah.
and then
It,
was resurrected by a company that came in and decided to redo it and do it right. And we got the Campbell Hotel, which is decorated in theme rooms,
yeah.
and has a lot of beautiful furnishings, really from a bygone era that you're not going to find in a modern hotel. It's just people describe it as a really fun experience. I've only seen the rooms. I have not stayed in one.
The upstairs mezzanine with a skylight, the conference room, just beautiful. I shortly after it opened, I met with some people there that had been involved with the renovation. They were showing me pictures.
Mhm.
Some of the upstairs hallways and had pigeon droppings 2 feet deep in the upstairs hallways. And to be honest, like say, I am glad they did this, but I don't know if I would have peed on that building if it was on fire. It was just it was beyond decrepit, and they turned that into a real showpiece.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I wanted to mention one thing to make sure we get it in. Part of Tulsa's renaissance of the Mother Road has involved this wonderful neon sign grant program
Yes,
that
yes,
Reese
yes.
Martin is involved with as being a member of the Route 66 Commission in Tulsa. And they have matching grants available for businesses along the Mother Road alignments and near the Mother Road alignments in Tulsa. Matching grants, and I forget what the cap is, but it's a high one for new neon signs or to refurbish older ones. And so in Tulsa, once again, if you drive through there after dark, you're going to see brilliant neon like you did in the old days,
Ah.
in the heyday of Route 66, when all these businesses were vying for the public's business with their, captivating neon signs. Well, now Tulsa has many of those again. There are a few classic ones that have been redone, that blend in with the newer ones that are done. But it's another kind of, you drive through it at night and you're like, wow, I can't believe this. I can't believe what they've done. It's just wonderful.
Well, that is another example of why anybody who is interested in community revitalization needs to examine Tulsa. You combine the neon sign facade grants and initiatives with the neon sign park that was created there.
Yeah, it's so funny, Jim. I don't tell this story much, but I don't. Yeah, I guess we have a minute, maybe
Oh
four.
no, we're okay. Go
There
ahead.
was, there was a public meeting in 2018 where they wanted to discuss what to do with a strip of land on the west end of the Cyrus Avery Memorial Bridge. They had a little bit of money left from again, it was something the voters voted on. It was called Vision 2025, and that had money for Route 66 improvements. And they were trying to figure out what to do with a little bit of money and a little bit of land they had left. Had a public meeting. They all went around the room, and as a citizen, a private citizen, I suggested that it be a neon sign park. That because Tulsa's lost so much, that we should recreate some of the classic neon signs that were in Tulsa. And so at the end, everybody, after everybody put their ideas on the chalkboard, when they voted on them, that idea won. And so a couple of years later, then we have the fruition of the neon sign park. And nowhere in any information does it ever say that I had a part in it. But I just take some personal pride of knowing
Sure.
that it was my idea, that that when I threw it out there, that is the one that everybody agreed on. So that's kind of fun.
Some of the greatest ideas come from the unsung heroes and the little people in the audience. That we don't get credit sometimes, but yeah, it's a great addition. Steve, when I publish this today, I'll have a link to Arcadia where they can get all of your books. If they want an autographed copy, what do we do here?
Well, I've got both Venmo and PayPal, and I
Okay.
don't know whether you want me to. I can go ahead and give you the Venmo and the PayPal right here. Would that be good, or do you want me to
Do you
give
have
you that?
do you have a website or how people
I
can
don't have a
contact?
website, but anyone can email me at Route 66 in Tulsa, which is the name of the book, at gmail.com.
Let's
If
do
you,
that.
that might be the easy thing. Just email me at Route 66 in Tulsa at gmail.com, and I'll fix you up with a signed copy. And just so people will know, the books are 25 and then $5 for shipping, so $30 total.
Yeah, this is perfect for the Christmas is coming up here. Uh, I'll put this in here, and when I publish this today, I will make sure this uh, is up. Uh, is that Route 66 in Tulsa? Route?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Yep.
Yeah, I thought I'd better because I know how I am.
Yeah, it's funny. We've had whole discussions on just how to pronounce, root, because if you get up, as you know, because you go to activities up in the Midwest, once you get probably a little north or east of the Illinois Missouri border, people start pronouncing it route,
Yeah.
and I had to. It was hard for me to convince, some people that, hey, some people call it route. They were like, no, they don't. Everybody calls it route, like Route 66. Well, they don't in the
Hey,
Midwest. you're gonna find people from those states, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, and they're gonna call it Route 66.
I was doing a presentation some years ago at Route 66 State Park, and Joe Sonderman was there in the audience.
Yeah.
And we got into a discussion somehow. Some people asked me a question about Missouri or Missouri. And it became a whole thing. But yeah, call me anything but late for dinner. That's
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned another giant of the Mother Road there, Joe Sonderman in Missouri. So he's another. He's been a prolific author, and his books are worth taking a look at as well.
Yeah, and he's so generous with his massive collection.
Yes.
He, Mike Ward, Steve Ryder are all so generous with their massive collection of postcards and memorabilia, and sharing it for authors like you and me to do these things.
I'm so glad you mentioned them because I was remiss by not. All three of those folks contributed to this book, which is, helped me just have wonderful images that augment, the historic photos that are in this book.
I just was gifted something. I mentioned this previously. I haven't got to it. I gave some of the Oklahoma materials to Reese Martin when we had dinner a couple weeks ago. At this stage in life, I'm trying to kind of downsize things a tad bit instead of, because one day these piles are going to fall over and bury me and nobody will find me for weeks. So 30 years ago, I would have just gone nuts over this. But yes, exactly. Pecan or pecan. Yes. Pecan or pecan. Exactly.
That is another good one.
I had a fella called me up a few months ago and said that he was cleaning up some things from his family's estate. And he said, he was given my number. He said, would you be interested in some Route 66 stuff, postcards, brochures, things of that nature? And I said, how much? And he says, well, I've got about 8 big envelopes, one for each state. And I says, well, yeah, I'll take that. And I says, I won't be home. He was coming into Kingman. He says, I can drop it off. I said, I won't be here, but I gave him my address. I came home and there's a box in front of my house so big I had to use a refrigerator dolly to move it in the house. And it is filled with family photograph albums, brochures, postcards in Route 66 communities back to 1906, menus, souvenir menus, placemats, road maps. I don't even know what all. I haven't even had a chance to get started on this, but I gave Reese a lot of the Oklahoma materials. I had an original menu from Beverly's Cafe, the original Lockwood chicken in the rough.
Right. Yeah. From Oklahoma City is where that originated. Yep.
I have one of the original menus. I gave that to Reese. But anyway.
Yeah, those are fun. I have sought out those placemats, and whenever I encounter one, I will buy one from various eateries along the Mother Road, and they're really fun. But there is a lot of stuff like that out there.
Well, now I know what to give you for Christmas. Let me see what's in here in this little.
Your Christmas present is this podcast. Thank you for that.
Well, Steve, we're overdue. This whole program was never meant as a Jim show. I want to encourage people to chase dreams, revitalize their community. I want to tell people where to go, and I don't want it to be a Jim show. I want it to focus on fascinating and interesting people like you and the work you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that a lot.
Steve, thank you for taking time from your schedule to do this today. And we'll get this published later today. And I'll have the information where they can order signed copies as well as all your books, from Arcadia. And encourage people to come to the Route 66 Road Fest next year. And that's turned into quite the event.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it's going to be hard to decide, what things to take in next year because it's so jam-packed with fun along the Mother Road.
Well, I say this often, but they started this almost 100 years ago, billing Route 66 as the main street of America. And
I know, and isn't that fascinating? Cy Avery was just such a dynamic force with, not only establishing the road but the promotion of it, like you said. So fun.
well, next year is the 250th anniversary of the United States,
Wow.
and I can't think of a better place to celebrate that than the main street of America.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this, Steve. Here's a little bit of trivia for you. The Main Street of America marketing campaign that those guys come up with, that was plagiarized.
I did remember. I do remember reading that somewhere. Yeah, where did they borrow that from?
Judge Lowe started that. He was the president of the National Old Trails Road Association. And they started a marketing campaign around 1913 when they realigned the road across northern Arizona and into California. And they started marketing National Old Trails Road as the main street of America. And in 1927, 28, the president of the National Old Trails Road Association, a fellow named Harry Truman out of Missouri, had brought up that the National Old Trails Road was the original main street of America, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah, I want to. Can I say something about all
Yes,
this?
please.
Um, I just, knowing that fact, as you just pointed out, reminds me with all this AI stuff, and especially like Chat GPT, I think that's a wonderful resource. Like I use it sometimes to build an outline for me.
Yes,
Because it'll pull from all these different sources and give me an outline of all these different aspects of things that I then need to write about or fill in to get the whole story on something. But you really can't rely on it for historic information,
there you go.
lock, stock, and barrel. You can't. It pulls from sources and then it kind of regurgitates it, and it fills in the blanks a lot of times that aren't accurate. And
Exactly.
so you have to do your own independent research. Anytime I am going to take something, a fact that I've discovered from Chat GPT, I'm going to be looking for a second source
Yes.
on that to make sure that I'm accurate, because the danger is that we're going to have all these things out there that are drawn from Chat GPT that are going to be inaccurate, and then people are going to spread that inaccurate version instead of the real history of something.
That we'll have to do this again because I've got a program I want to put together about staying relevant as we age, and that means embracing AI. And I use Notebook LM, Chat GPT, and other programs. But I'm like you, just like with the automobile, with television, the internet, it's a mixed blessing. It is the most wonderful tool I've ever seen, and it's the scariest damn thing because of exactly what you said. People are not doing their homework. They're printing articles, they're writing books using this, and they're printing it, and then AI picks up on that and regurgitates it. And yeah, we've already got a problem with people not knowing what to believe and what not to, and now we're befuddling that. But as a research tool, it's a good starting point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Steve, thank you so much, Steve, for the books and for your dedication and for all the contributions you've made to this, keeping this thing a going here. It's
Well,
greatly
thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you for all the things that you do. I appreciate it a lot.
It's a team effort, my friends. It's a team effort. I will let you go, Steve, and I'm going to go look for some lunch.
Great.
And we'll bid everyone adios and hopefully encourage a road trip with a little music from Joe and Woody and the boys of the Road Crew 66 out of Nashville. I was going to say I'll get some information up as soon as I can, but I understand that the Old Texas Historic Route 66 Association has made arrangements for the Road Crew to perform in Amarillo next year at one of their big events.
Yes, I wish I had the dates on that, but yes, that is my understanding as well, and that'll be wonderful.
Sounds good. Steve, I hope to see you at Roadfest.
Yeah, you will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Adios, my friends. We'll get you out on the road with some road trip inspiring music here.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.